and I am the prime sponsor of House Bill 1993, now Act 77 of 2024. The governor signed it into law last week. And I wanted to especially recognize a few folks who are here today: Commissioner Dan Vogler, Commissioner Chris Sanada, Commissioner Dan Kennedy, Commissioner Tim McGonigal, and City of Newcastle Mayor Mark Alisco. And of course, we appreciate everyone else who is able to be here too. I've been traveling the Commonwealth for 9 months, going to pharmacies and talking about the abuses of pharmacy benefits managers. And I got to tell you, this is by far the most media I've seen show up. And of course, I assume it's because you are all just very interested in PBMs and nothing else. But for those who don't know, pharmacy benefits managers are a corporate monopoly that are putting our local pharmacies out of business and are raising costs for patients. And they're this secretive middlemen that people don't know exists. And that's why legislation like this is so critically important. I want to recognize the bipartisan efforts that have led to the passage of this new law. My colleague in the House, Representative Gatos, Senator Brooks is here from the Senate. We also had Senator Ward and Senator Tartaglione. We're in critical partners. And of course, from the administration, Commissioner Humphreys and our governor, Josh Shapiro. Taking on corporate greed isn't easy, but it's something that I do every day in this role. And let me tell you, the pharmacy benefits managers are not happy that this legislation is cutting into the profits that they've been holding on to. Those profits that are raising costs for consumers and are under-reimbursing our pharmacies so that they go out of business. But no more. Pennsylvania is not a haven for corporations that want to take advantage of patients and of local businesses. And that's why we've passed one of the strongest laws for PBM reform anywhere in the nation. And I want to thank especially Governor Shapiro for his leadership on this issue as well. Pharmacies like Hometown Pharmacy are critical healthcare providers. But not only that, they do things like sponsor our kids' sports teams, march in our parade, and are here anytime we have questions about our prescriptions or other healthcare questions as well. And we need them. We've had 140 pharmacies go out of business just in Pennsylvania since the start of this year alone. And the goal of this legislation is to stop that trend, to give our insurance commissioner the tools that he needs to address the terrible practices of pharmacy benefits managers, to keep our pharmacies in business, and to lower costs for patients. I'm really glad to be here today to get to celebrate this with all of you, and I have the honor of introducing Ron McDermott from Hometown Pharmacy.
Thanks, Rep. Thanks, Ron.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Representative Benham, and thank you for your leadership throughout this process. Hometown Pharmacy is excited to be hosting this landmark event and wants to extend a warm welcome to Governor Shapiro, to our legislative partners, our local dignitaries here in Newcastle, and all of our industry partners, including Value Drug. I'd also like to recognize our community-focused ownership group, including Bob Eckert, Gary Morozek, and our founder, Wanda Morozek. Growing from the legacy that Wanda started right here in Newcastle over 20 years ago, we now employ over 80 caring Pennsylvania pharmacists and technicians who go the extra mile every day for our patients, and we thank every one of you. Thank you very, very much. As a result of bipartisan support, as mentioned, from both parts of our legislature and Governor Shapiro and his administration, Act 77 of 2024 has now been passed. Many thanks to all of you for listening to your community pharmacies and the constituents that are out there that are our patients. We still have a lot of work to do in order to ensure the long-term viability of pharmacies in Pennsylvania and maintain access for our patients. We cannot see more pharmacies close in our state. I'll repeat that. We cannot see more pharmacies close in our state. This legislation is a stepping stone to curtailing and regulating some of the harmful and unfair business practices of pharmacy benefit managers. These are one-sided and unilaterally imposing regulations on both our community pharmacies and the patients who want to visit us. We believe this legislation will help stem the tide of pharmacy closings and provide our Pennsylvania patients the right to use the pharmacy of their choice with fewer strings attached. Our community pharmacies, just so you all realize, we do the extras that the most vulnerable patients out there need us to do. It may be something as simple as compliance packaging or home delivery, or maybe it's a little extra time with your pharmacist to discuss your medications that you wouldn't get in another pharmacy that doesn't take that time. Access to our pharmacies and our community pharmacies like this is critical. Our pharmacies are there because we want to help and treat our patients. We want to be there for our patients. And now finally, the Pennsylvania Insurance Department will have the teeth and authority to regulate and correct PBM injustices, and as a result, access to quality health care will be more readily available for patients, and our pharmacies should therefore suffer less harm from the anti-competitive tactics used by PBMs. I want to thank you all again for being here and for your support of community pharmacy. I'd now like to introduce Insurance Commissioner Michael Humphreys and also thank him and the department for their support.
Thank you. And thank you, Governor, for your leadership on this issue. Thank you to the representatives and the senator for getting this important bipartisan bill done, and to Hometown Pharmacy for hosting us here today. Before Act 77, PBMs paid a $35 fee and were essentially given a welcome to Pennsylvania card. Not anymore. Act 77 gives the Pennsylvania Insurance Department the tools to regulate PBMs and their certain predatory practices. It contains 5 important protections for Pennsylvanians and for local pharmacies. First, the Act prohibits a PBM from paying unaffiliated and independent pharmacies less than the amount that the PBM reimburses its own affiliated pharmacies. And it requires a PBM to pass along at least 50% of any drug manufacturer rebates to the health benefit plan, ultimately to benefit consumers. Second, the Act places strict regulation around patient steering, which is the practice of channeling prescriptions to the PBM's own pharmacies. The Act prohibits a PBM or insurer from requiring a patient to purchase drugs exclusively through a mail order pharmacy or through a pharmacy affiliated with that PBM. And it does not allow a PBM to automatically transfer a patient's prescriptions away from the in-network pharmacy of that patient's choosing. Third, the Act provides important protections for patients when they show up at a pharmacy. It prohibits the so-called clawing back of extra money that's higher than the cost of the drug itself. Paying more than you would if you were uninsured just doesn't make sense, and it won't be allowed to happen again. Fourth, the Act requires a PBM to establish an adequate and accessible pharmacy network that provides for the convenient patient access to pharmacies within a reasonable distance of that patient's home. The network must not be limited to PBM-affiliated pharmacies, and it must meet or exceed more robust Medicare Part D pharmacy network standards. Fifth and finally, the Act imposes new reporting requirements on PBMs. Beginning in July of 2026, PBMs must submit an annual report to us at PID that will show the amount of rebates that the PBM received from drug manufacturers and did not pass through to its health insurer clients. It'll show all administrative fees that the PBM received from all drug manufacturers and any differences between what it pays its affiliate pharmacies and the retail and independent pharmacists. In short, Act 77 gets a lot done for Pennsylvanians and for our pharmacy partners. And at PID, we're excited to move forward with its implementation. So thank you all again for the opportunity to be here today. I'll now turn it over to Senator Brooks, the Health and Human Services Committee Chair.
I appreciate the opportunity to join each and every one of you. So often we hear or read about what we disagree on. But today, we are here to gather to talk about something we all agree on and what we worked collectively on and we partnered on. I want to thank the governor for his leadership on this issue in getting this done. For so many years, we talked about a strong transparency bill and a PBM bill, and here we are, we got it done. So again, I want to thank the governor for your leadership. I also want to thank each caucus. Our leadership, the Republican caucus, Senator Pittman, Senator Ward, but I also want to thank Senator Costa's caucus and the two caucuses in the House of Representatives. Again, working together to get things done. And the thing that united us is the topic and understanding of knowing how important our hometown and community pharmacists are. Regardless of what age we are, when we are at the most vulnerable of times, whether we have the flu, whether we have the chronic illness, or whether we're seriously ill, our hometown community pharmacist is there. There's someone we trust, there's someone we can confide in, and there's someone that can guide us in those challenging times. We're tired of the 1-800 nowhere numbers. We need our community pharmacists in our communities. Our families need them, and each of us rely on them. So again, I want to thank the pharmacists, Ron McDermott, for your advocacy on this legislation. He worked tirelessly over the years. And also, again, the governor and all of our caucuses. And I want to thank each and every one of you for supporting our hometown community pharmacies. Thank you very much. And I would like to introduce Representative Gatos.
Thank you, Senator Brooks. Well said. And my colleagues have articulated very well that this was truly a bipartisan effort. It was bicameral, and we couldn't have done it without everybody working together, and of course having Governor Shapiro sign this bill. So we thank the governor for taking this across the finish line. So, I am absolutely pleased to be talking about this bill because we have been working on this transparency piece for almost 15 years. Now, I've been in the legislature since 2019, and we have had several transparency bills, but this is the first time that we have had such a comprehensive bill take this across the finish line. We all know that medication management is the most important aspect of healthcare, from your doctor to your pharmacist to you. And all doctors and pharmacies deal with PBMs. But many of the practices that were set forth by PBMs have resulted in barriers to really providing good healthcare. How many times have you been to the doctor and get a prescription only to find out that the pharmacy it wasn't covered, or the price was prohibitive, or your pharmacist was unable to get the prescription that you were prescribed, or you were told that you no longer could go to your pharmacist that you trusted all your life? This is exactly why we are here today. Because affordable prescription drugs is not just a matter of convenience. It's a fundamental aspect of healthcare for millions of Pennsylvanians. And I want to shift a little bit to talking about the past of PBMs were set up to be efficient, to help provide better healthcare. But over the period of years that these PBMs, I don't want to say game the system, but essentially, we can say it. But I mean, look, it was time for us to address this. And by the way, for almost 50 years, they were working pretty well. So, but there really came a time to really re-examine how that these PBMs were working for the consumer. And what we found out is that 80% of the market was controlled by 3 PBMs. Now, not all PBMs are bad, but when you get 80% of the market being controlled by 3, that starts to become not free market. So this bill really allows the free market to thrive and serve the customer. So I'm proud to have been a part of this effort to advance this legislation. And I thank Representative Benham for all the hard work she did to get this across the finish line. And this law signifies the dedication that fostering healthcare and in healthcare environment upholds patient welfare and supports our local pharmacies, which are really a vital portion of our communities. So I look forward to seeing the positive impact once we get this implemented. And thanks, Governor Shapiro, for signing this legislation into law. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rep. Thank you.
And I'll tell you that the star of the show here is Jack Melvin. Jack is a customer of this pharmacy and really is going to tell us a little bit about really what the effect is on the consumer. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, everyone, and Governor, for coming. I'm going to speak extemporaneously here about the value that I've experienced here with Hometown Pharmacy. Previously, about 4 years ago, I have had that much experience with Hometown Pharmacy. I was dealing with a small, family-owned, standalone pharmacy, family-owned, and they went out of business because they couldn't afford to keep the doors open. This must stop. I am a businessman, have been for all my life. The bedrock of an economy, whether it's in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or any place else, is going to be the small businessman. And if we let them go under, whether it happens to be healthcare, manufacturing, whatever it happens to be, we are not going to have an economy. What Hometown Pharmacy has offered to me and all of my friends that I've brought here is that they exemplify a level of care that is unexcelled. I have never experienced this. Your big brick and mortar stores never can offer this. You're nothing more than a number. How many times, I'm here quite often, do I hear the owners refer to the customers coming in the door by their first name? And they bid them goodbye when they leave, inferring that they're really happy about having the business. Well, I must tell you that the legislation that they have initially started to pass here is excellent, but there's a lot of work to be done from my understanding. And for it to have 70, 80, 100, or maybe even 140 pharmacies close in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania since the start of this calendar year is totally unacceptable. To leave the big boys run everything and take all the money, you can't as a private owner stay in business. This is, I must say this, Governor, vanguarding this as you have and others, you must have all the accolades that I can bestow upon you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you.
You know, we're just a little place in western Pennsylvania, Newcastle, Pennsylvania, but that we actually have the governor here, I am impressed. I really am impressed. And I was very, very honored to meet him. I'm going to let the governor take over.
You're doing great, Jack. I mean, take your time. You can answer all their questions.
Well, only ones that I have interaction directly with the pharmacy. Now, you know these two owners. These two owners. Anyway.
Take your time.
Anyway, the one thing I wanted to say before I let the governor speak. Hold on, you'll get to speak. Is that even though this is the flagship store for Hometown Pharmacy, they have other stores. I'm not sure, 12, 13. 15. That doesn't make it necessarily that they're outside the loop of profitability only by making it up in volume. All their stores are subjected to the same constraints that this store experiences. Now, not so much, I suppose, the stores they have in Ohio, but in the Commonwealth, that's our business right here. And that's the reason the governor is so valuable to us.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you. Thanks, Jack. It's a real tough act to follow. Hey, gang, it is great to be back in Newcastle. And Jack, I want to thank you for the kind words. And thanks for sharing your personal story. And I want to say I've been in Newcastle a whole bunch of times. And while I was standing up here and those raindrops began to fall, it made me realize every single time I've been in Newcastle, it has rained. So maybe it's me, Mayor. But I did notice that even as those few raindrops came down, Senator Brooks had her sunglasses on, which is a good omen. And the fact that Senator Brooks is here, the fact that Representative Gatos is here, and the fact that our lead sponsor, Representative Benham, is here, tells you a story about how we get stuff done in Pennsylvania, bringing Republicans and Democrats together to solve real challenges. That's what the good people of Pennsylvania want us to do. And so I want to begin today by saying just how grateful I am to these three legislative leaders for seeing a problem, for working on it, for educating not just themselves, but their colleagues, and for ultimately getting this bill through the legislative process in a divided legislature and getting it to my desk so we could get this signed into law. I am deeply grateful to these three fine lawmakers, and I'm especially grateful that Senator Brooks has her sunglasses on. Thank you very, very much. We appreciate you. I want to say a little bit about being here at Hometown and having the privilege to stand next to Wanda and hear a little bit about her story and how they built this wonderful business. Hometown is a great pharmacy here in Lawrence County. It's also a place where I feel really at home because the pharmacy that I go to when I'm at our family home in Montgomery County, it's called the Abington Pharmacy. It's a place where you pick up your prescription, a place where you grab a snack, a place maybe where you pick up a greeting card. But it's also a place where literally folks know your name and they're there to talk to you and treat you as a friend and as a neighbor. You know, Lori and I are blessed with 4 children, and Wanda, we went through that cycle in our lives where it felt like every other day we were picking up amoxicillin at the pharmacy because one of our kids, of course, had an ear infection. And I remember walking into the pharmacist and they'd say, which kid has the ear infection today, right? Or how's it going, Josh? And I just want you to know that I place real value in places like Hometown. I place real value in these pharmacies, not just because of the drugs that they dispense, but because of the way in which they enrich a community and the way they're there for their neighbors. These local independent pharmacies, as you heard from Ron and Jack and others, they are facing a lot of challenges right now here in rural communities and all across Pennsylvania. For too long, we have had these PBMs, these middlemen between the drug manufacturers and the pharmacies, manipulating and profiting off of the pharmacy system at the expense of consumers and certainly at the expense of community pharmacies like Hometown and like Abington. They've been driving up prices. They've been unilaterally changing the terms of contracts with pharmacies, and they've been picking and choosing who the winners and the losers are in that equation. Listen, when the middlemen get rich, our local independent pharmacies are the losers, and that is not okay with me nor any of the folks who are up here. Since January 1st, as you heard a moment ago from Jack, over 70 independent pharmacies have closed their doors in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That is unacceptable. And it makes it harder for Pennsylvanians, especially rural Pennsylvanians, to get access to the medications that they so desperately need. Consider this for a moment. 21 of our 67 counties already now have fewer than 10 pharmacies within their boundaries. And a whole bunch of those counties have large geographic surface areas, making the drive to get your prescriptions much further, much longer, and much more arduous. Local independent pharmacies are being forced out of business primarily due to the greed of these PBMs. And at the same time, the good people of Pennsylvania are getting screwed over with much higher prescription drug costs and reducing access to the medications that they so desperately need. And while all that is happening, consumers getting screwed and local pharmacies shutting down, PBMs, well, they're making record profits off the backs of Pennsylvanians. So my administration and lawmakers like the folks here from both parties, we came together to do something about it. Back in February, I called for meaningful reform in this area. And House and Senate leaders, who many of them were already working on this, they got to work even harder. Just last week, I signed into law landmark reforms of PBMs, sponsored by Representative Benham, with incredible assists from Representative Gatos and Senator Brooks and many others, to stop PBMs from screwing over Pennsylvanians. I want you to know that this isn't just a one-line bill that says, hey, PBM, stop screwing over Pennsylvanians. There's a whole lot of substance in it. Let me very quickly walk you through it. Number one, PBMs can no longer dictate what pharmacy you can go to get your medicine from. That practice called steering, where they would literally steer you away from a place like Hometown, that is now a thing of the past. Second, PBMs used to artificially inflate the costs you paid at the pharmacy in order to increase their own profits. So listen, if you were trying to take a medication that costs about $5 and the PBM set the cost at $20, we ended up helping them make a profit, driving up the cost of your prescription drugs and making it harder for pharmacies like Hometown. Those clawbacks that those PBMs used to engage in drive up costs at the pharmacy counter, and they are set by the PBMs, not the pharmacy itself. We put a stop to that predatory practice as well. Third, the other key piece of this legislation is we now have some transparency and accountability in the process. So Commissioner Humphreys, who leads our insurance department, he is now in a position where he can hold them even more accountable. He can gather more data from them, and there can be real transparency. So if further reform is needed, I know these three lawmakers behind me and the coalition of Republicans and Democrats that they've built, they'll be able to get to work on any other modifications or amendments to this law. Listen, I'm proud to stand here today in Lawrence County and tell you these reforms that we passed, the PBMs hate these reforms, which means we are doing something right. And I'm proud of the fact that we have taken on this big business. I'm proud of the fact that we've taken on this industry in order to stand up for places like Hometown. Now, after I made my announcement back in February that we needed to regulate PBMs, man, you should have seen them lining up to come see me in my office. They all came in, they all sat down, they all tried to make their point. And you know what I did? I sent them out of my office. They passed this bill and I signed it into law, and we stood up for the good people of Pennsylvania. We're making sure that more money stays in consumers' pockets and more places like Hometown stay open in our communities, especially rural communities across Pennsylvania. Listen, here's the last thing I want to say. It should be lost on no one that this is the only state in the nation, our Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, with a divided legislature. I'm the only governor with a divided legislature. Think about that for a minute. The Senate led by Republicans, the House led by Democrats. It's really hard in these politically polarized times to have a conversation, let alone get anything done. Yet here in Pennsylvania, we are proving that we can bring Republicans and Democrats together to get meaningful things done, to pass meaningful reform like this PBM reform, to come together and make the first significant progress on K-12 education in generations, meeting the mandate that the court put out to us to not only fund our schools adequately, but drive those dollars into the schools that need it most. To come together after 30 years of talking about higher education and the need to invest there and the need to put more money into students' pockets to drive down the cost of higher education. We came together. We worked together. We passed that reform together. After 20 years of listening to seniors call out for a tax cut, for an expansion of the property tax rent rebate, we came together, Democrats and Republicans, and passed the largest targeted tax cut for seniors in nearly 20 years. After more than 50 years of our state police and our infrastructure interests, the people who build our roads and bridges, literally having to pull from the same pot of money and being forced to choose between public safety and a strong public infrastructure, we worked together to decouple our infrastructure funding from our state police funding, and we managed to increase funding for both infrastructure and for law enforcement, hiring nearly 1,000 new state troopers and over 1,000 new municipal police officers across this Commonwealth. Folks, here in Pennsylvania, we are proving that we can get stuff done by bringing Republicans and Democrats together. We are proving that we stand together for the good people of Pennsylvania. And listen, again, I know these are hyper-polarized times, but when lawmakers like this put aside whatever differences they have and we move the ball down the field, we should celebrate that as a Commonwealth. We should be proud of that. Yes, we should hold true to our values and our particular views, and we're not going to agree on everything. But when we do come together and we do agree on something, it's worth celebrating. That's why I'm back here in Lawrence County today, here in Newcastle at the Hometown Pharmacy, because we moved the ball down the field. We lowered prescription drug costs. We stood up for our community members, and we stood by small businesses like this that were just looking for a shot. I'm proud of that work we did, and I'm grateful to these lawmakers and others who are here today who made that possible. Thank you all very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, we'll be happy to take some questions from the media.
Legislators that were going to find out how much money was pocketed by the three largest PBMs due to spread pricing? Are we ever going to get a big number?
Thanks to the transparency measures that are in place in this law, our insurance commissioner, Commissioner Humphreys, now has the tools he needs to be able to dig into those questions, to be able to provide that information to lawmakers if they want to make additional amendments or changes, and to the public so that they know the impact that these PBMs, these greedy middlemen, have had on the process.
Piggybacking off of that question, will there be any accountability once we do know the impact that they had on pharmacies as well as patients?
There will be accountability, both because the insurance commissioner now has the tools to bring about the accountability, and because lawmakers, leaders like them, have the ability to go back and make additional changes if they're necessary.
Vice President, I'm sorry, Governor.
Hang on, I got a sense of where you're going with this. I want to see if there's other questions on this topic. Yeah.
How soon could it be until local pharmacies really feel the difference in the overhead?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to begin to be felt soon by putting these measures in place and stopping the PBMs from steering folks away from hometown or from the pricing that was increasing the costs for consumers while driving up record profits from PBMs. I think we're going to begin to feel the effects of that very, very soon.
Will pharmacists be able to share their contracts without getting cease and desist letters?
Will pharmacists be able to share their contracts without getting cease and desist letters? Commissioner, you want to address that?
They're welcome to share the contracts with us today, and we can go back to both the PBM and the insurer to negotiate what's appropriate and what's not, like a gag clause would fall in the not so appropriate category.
Thank you. Anything else on this? Yeah.
Governor, there are three large Medicare Advantage plans, Elevance, Aetna, and CVS, that have all said they're raising costs for Medicare Advantage plans, which most Pennsylvanians have, starting in January, as a result of federal changes to the drug pricing. So the insurers are going to have to pick up 80% of the price instead of 20%, so they're going to pass it along to all of us.
Yeah.
How much of a difference, I mean, obviously this is federal matters, but how much of a difference does this legislation, how much do you think, how are you going to measure the effectiveness of this?
Well, I'm going to ask the commissioner to come up and speak about the specifics. We're going to be able to measure it because we now have transparency measures in place to be able to report back to lawmakers and the public as to what's happening with pricing. Ideally, not only how we're lowering the pricing as a result of this new law, but how we're able to slow the effects that PBMs were having on our community pharmacies. So more community pharmacies will remain open, ease of access will be there, and prescription drug costs will come down. Mr. Commissioner?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is now the insurance department will have a better view into the development of formularies and where those drugs are put on the formulary in the commercial plan, so that we'll be able to take a review of whether too many drugs are being moved to more expensive tiers, for instance, versus more balanced across the tiers to make sure that people can afford the drugs that they need.
Anything else? Yes.
Governor Shapiro, have you, your team, your lawyers, or anyone in your orbit received paperwork for VP vetting?
I'll tell you what I want to do here. I'm going to answer your questions, but I have great respect for Senator Brooks and Representative Gatos and everybody up here. I am certain, without even making eye contact with them, that they do not want to be standing behind me when I answer these questions. So you are welcome to stand here. You're also welcome to take a step away if you want. I'm really sensitive to that, okay? Y'all can do whatever you want. Listen, here's what I will say. I have addressed this issue many times. As to any process, I think you should address those process questions to the Harris campaign. I think they are best suited to be able to answer them.
I saw that the Philadelphia Democratic Committee, Bob Brady, and Speaker Joanna McClinton endorsed a Harris-Shapiro ticket. What is your response to that, and did you know that was coming?
No, and here's what I will say. The vice president now has a deeply personal decision to make, one that she is obviously quite familiar with because she went through it with then candidate Biden when she was selected to serve as the vice president of the United States. That is a deeply personal decision that should be made free from any political pressure. And while I am, of course, grateful for the kindness that Speaker McClinton and Congressman Brady shared, this is a process that the vice president needs to go through and make her decision based upon factors that she lays forward.
Governor, to that question, we've seen in the last several days the editorial board of the New York Times, now Black Lives Matter, have criticized the choice of Vice President Harris. You have foursquare endorsed her. What do you think of these outside entities suggesting a primary is needed within the party, or as the New York Times suggested, that she's just absolutely the wrong choice?
Well, I haven't read those editorials, but I have the gist of it based on your question. So allow me to answer it generally, not in response to any particular writing. Anyone could have jumped into this process. Anyone could. It was an open process. The vice president jumped in. I endorsed her immediately, as of course did President Biden. She has earned this nomination. She has earned the support of the needed number of delegates to make her the nominee. She has done an extraordinary job over the last, 72, 96 hours, something like that, of consolidating the party behind her. For anyone calling for any open process, I will tell you, we had one. And you know what? She kicked butt and she earned the support and she earned the nomination, and I'm proud to support her. We'll take another one or two.
Democrats could win every swing state except PA.
I just didn't hear the beginning of your question.
Democrats could win every swing state except Pennsylvania and Georgia and still lose. Meanwhile, if former President Trump gets Pennsylvania, he goes to the White House. What's your message to Pennsylvania voters?
Are you playing that game online where you do the electoral college voting? Look, it doesn't take a political expert. I think actually Democrats and Republicans would agree on this, that Pennsylvania is the center of the political universe. We were 248 years ago when on the other side of the state, we helped this democracy be formed. When our founders came together with a vision for what they wanted in this nation, a place where we could be cloaked in freedom, where everyone would have opportunity. And over the last 248 years, we've perfected our union. We've gotten better in our democracy. We have made sure that we addressed the problems that existed in our democracy and made sure that everyone, no matter what they looked like or what their gender is, could participate in our democracy. We should be proud of our heritage here in this Commonwealth and the role that we have played in perfecting our union. And I think Pennsylvanians and Pennsylvania voters of both parties should be proud of the fact, and independents should be proud of the fact now that they have such an outsized voice in this process. The road to the White House leads through Pennsylvania. And listen, it also doesn't take an expert to know the last two presidential races came down to a point or less. I expect this race will be close as well. And I'm going to do everything in my political power to advocate for Kamala Harris to be the 47th president of the United States. We'll take one more.
Governor, can we ask a question on another subject, if we could?
I wish. I mean, go ahead.
Governor Shapiro, you told KDKA from Pittsburgh that the Harris campaign did contact you on Sunday to talk about her vying for that presidential seat. Have you had any further contact since Sunday? Any discussions?
First off, I was really quite honored just a few moments after the president issued his statement to receive a call from President Biden. And I think it is important that we don't lose sight of the fact in all of this that President Biden is a patriot who served our nation honorably and made a really difficult choice. And I appreciate the fact that there are people here who support President Biden and don't. That's okay. But you can't take away anything from the fact that he has served this nation honorably over more than 50 years. Following his call, I received a call from Vice President Harris. And we talked about one thing and one thing only. She asked, well, I guess technically two. One, she asked me for my endorsement. And two, we discussed how to defeat Donald Trump here in Pennsylvania. That's all we discussed, and she and I have not spoken since then.
Netanyahu is speaking on Capitol Hill today. Some Republicans are saying that it was a snub for Harris not to participate in the address. What do you say to them?
Well, I understand that Republicans are nervous about the vice president. They're going to look for any excuse to try and attack her. So I assume this is just more of the same from them. Yeah. Please.
One county to the north, as you're aware, there was a pretty atrocious homicide. Young boy, a young child killed and then dismembered. There have been across the Commonwealth calls for tougher hate crime legislation because of that. Your stance, because we've talked to local prosecutors in Mercer County, the current law really deals as a misdemeanor, not as the federal sources would. Would you want to push for tougher legislation for that?
Well, first off, let me say that to the family, I want to continue to express my prayers, my blessings for them to find some level of peace and calm in what is a horrific situation for them. And I say that not just as a governor, I say that as a father of four. There is nothing worse than losing a child. That is the first thing. We should all, find the humanity to share our prayers with that family. Second, I'm not going to certainly get ahead of the local investigators. They're going to make whatever charging decisions they make. In general, I have believed for 20 years that we need to update our hate crimes laws. They're known as ethnic intimidation laws here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In fact, when I was a state representative serving where Representative Benham and Representative Gatos now serve, and with then Representative Brooks, I attempted to strengthen our hate crimes laws in order to add gender identity and sexual orientation to those laws, to afford people more protections. The reason I did that then, and the reason why I continue to advocate for it today, and it's my hope that lawmakers will come together and pass it, is because I think it's our responsibility as Pennsylvanians to carry forth the vision of our founder, William Penn. Now, he might not have ever envisioned a scenario like what transpired here in Pennsylvania, but he certainly tried to build a Commonwealth that was warm and welcoming for all, a place that would be tolerant, a place where all people would be respected, a place where everyone would feel welcome and safe. We've got some work to do to continue to build on Penn's vision and to continue to contribute to his legacy. And one of the important ways we could do that is by passing and strengthening our hate crimes laws here in the Commonwealth. I want to thank you all for being here. We appreciate you. And for those of you who came from out of town because you care so much about PBMs, make sure you eat in our restaurants on your way back to wherever you came from. Thank you, gang. Yeah.